So, what if the biggest conspiracy of the 20th century wasn't a conspiracy at all? For over 50 years, a small but loud group has been saying that humanity's giant leap was just a giant lie. A Hollywood blockbuster staged on a dusty backlot. They point to so-called clues, hiding in plain sight, a flag that waves, a sky with no stars, and shadows that seem to break the laws of physics. They whisper about secret deals with famous directors and deadly radiation belts that made the trip impossible. They're great stories, and they're designed to make you doubt one of our most incredible achievements. But what if that waving flag, those missing stars, and the weird shadows aren't proof of a movie set? What if they're actually proof that we really went to the moon? We're putting 10 minutes on the clock to flip the biggest moon landing myths on their head and show you the real story. And it's a story based on science, hard evidence, and some serious human ingenuity. The clock starts now. Myth number 1, the waving flag. First up, the poster child for the whole conspiracy, the American flag. The argument is simple, and let's be honest, it makes sense at first. The flag looks like it's waving in photos and videos, but the moon's a vacuum, no wind. So, what gives? The secret isn't a hidden studio fan, it's just some clever engineering. NASA's team knew a normal flag would just hang there limply, which doesn't exactly scream, "We did it." So, they designed the flag with a horizontal rod running through the top to hold it out. During the Apollo 11 mission, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had trouble extending that rod all the way, which made the fabric bunch up. Those wrinkles are what you see in the photos, giving the illusion of movement. But I saw it flutter on video, you say? You did. That motion came from the astronauts themselves as they twisted and rocked the pole to get it into the tough lunar soil. On Earth, the air would have stopped that flapping pretty quickly. But in a vacuum with no air resistance, the flag kept swinging back and forth like a pendulum long after they let go. So instead of proving it was a fake, the flag's behavior is exactly what physics says should happen in a vacuum. Myth number 2, no stars in the sky. All right. Next up, the sky. In all the pictures, it's pitch black, but there are 0 stars. Conspiracy theorists argue that NASA just forgot to paint them on the backdrop. This one falls apart with a little photography 101. You can even try this at home. Go outside at night and take a picture of a friend standing under a bright porch light. To get your friend in focus, the camera settings will make the much dimmer stars in the background totally disappear. To see the stars, you'd need a long exposure, which would turn your friend into a washed-out, ghostly blur. The astronauts were working in direct, unfiltered sunlight on the moon's surface, which was blindingly bright. Their cameras had to be set to a fast shutter speed to properly capture them in their shiny white suits and all the details of the landscape. The faint light from distant stars just wasn't bright enough to show up on the film. In fact, a special camera on the Apollo 16 mission, working in the shadow of the lunar module, took long exposure shots that clearly showed the Earth and all the right stars behind it. Myth number 3, the impossible shadows. Let's talk about shadows. In a lot of Apollo photos, the shadows from the astronauts and the equipment aren't parallel. Theorists say this proves there were multiple lights, like in a film studio, because the sun is so far away, it should create perfectly parallel shadows. This is just a classic trick of perspective. It's the same reason railroad tracks look like they touch in the distance. The moon's surface isn't a flat floor. It's covered in hills, craters, and bumps. This uneven ground makes the shadows fall at all sorts of different angles. When you see that on a 2D photo, it can look like the shadows are going in different directions. You can see this for yourself on any sunny day with a couple of objects on bumpy ground. No Hollywood lighting needed, just basic geometry. Myth number 4, the deadly Van Allen belts. Now for one of the more sciencey claims, the Van Allen radiation belts. These are 2 donut-shaped rings of radiation around Earth, and the theory goes that they're so deadly, the astronauts would have been fried passing through them. This myth sounds terrifying, but it ignores NASA's brilliant game plan. First, the Apollo spacecraft was moving incredibly fast, up to 25,000 miles per hour. Their trip through the belts was super short, only a couple of hours total, which limited their exposure. Second, their flight path was carefully chosen to zip through the thinnest parts of the belts, avoiding the most intense radiation. And finally, the aluminum hull of the spacecraft itself acted as a shield, blocking most of the dangerous particles. Dosimeters worn by the astronauts confirmed it all worked. The total radiation dose they got during the entire trip was about the same as a single chest X-ray, totally within safe limits. Getting through the Van Allen belts wasn't impossible. It was just a tough engineering problem that was solved with smarts and speed. Myth number 5, the Kubrick connection. This brings us to the most Hollywood myth of them all, that the whole thing was faked and directed by the legendary filmmaker Stanley Kubrick. The story goes that after he made 2001, A Space Odyssey, NASA hired him to work his movie magic on a secret soundstage. It's a fun story, but there is zero evidence connecting Kubrick to Apollo. In fact, film experts say that faking it with 1969 technology would have been even harder than actually going to the moon. To get that floaty, low-gravity look, they would have needed to film everything in slow motion. But making slow motion look real requires shooting at a super high frame rate. And the cameras that could do that and produce the clear video we saw from the moon simply didn't exist yet. Let's be real, the idea that a perfectionist like Kubrick would have let all those so-called mistakes we just debunked slip by is pretty funny. The final proof. So, after all that, what's the final nail in the coffin for these myths? There are 2 big ones. First, think about the Cold War. In 1969, the US and the Soviet Union were in a bitter space race. The Soviets were tracking the Apollo missions every step of the way. If America had faked it, the Soviets would have known, and they would have screamed it from the rooftops to score the biggest propaganda victory in history. They never said a word. Their silence is one of the loudest endorsements you can get. Second, and maybe the coolest proof of all, is something we can still check today. Astronauts from the Apollo 11, 14, and 15 missions left behind special mirrors on the moon called retroreflectors. For over 50 years, observatories here on Earth have been shooting powerful lasers at those mirrors. By timing how long it takes the light to bounce back, they can measure the distance to the moon with incredible precision. This experiment is still ongoing, using those original reflectors and newer ones left by recent missions, like India's Chandrayaan-3 lander. Simply put, you can't hit a target that isn't there. And if you need to see it to believe it, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has taken high-res photos of the landing sites. You can clearly see the lander modules, the scientific gear, and even the faint tracks the astronauts' boots left in the dust. More recently, orbiters from other countries like India and South Korea have also taken their own pictures, independently confirming that the Apollo hardware is still sitting right where we left it. So there you have it. The waving flag, the starless sky, the weird shadows, The deadly radiation, every single one, has a clear, logical, and scientific explanation. The moon landing wasn't a hoax. It was a triumph of courage and ingenuity, accomplished by hundreds of thousands of people working together. The evidence isn't hiding in grainy photos. It's being confirmed by lasers shot across the sky and by orbiters circling the moon right now. The next time someone tells you we never went to the moon, you'll know the real story. The truth is always way more interesting than fiction. If you had fun busting these myths with us, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because there are a lot more conspiracies out there that need a good dose of reality. Until next time, keep asking questions, but always look for the evidence. Thanks for watching. Please visit our sponsor, threadsofrebellion.com, and use the coupon code in the description for an exclusive discount.